Namaskar. Welcome to this session. We are considering the Klesha Parva and Asmita therein. And in the last session, we came to the definition given by Patanjali. The definitions should be definitions defining and not bothering about what is the simplest way of doing it and what is simpler way of doing it. The definition has to be definition in the sense it should not be over pervasive, under pervasive. Uh, it must characterize the whole thing in those barest few words. And therefore, one cannot be expecting the definitions to be simpler. Now, the definition given in the sutra is Druk darshan shaktyoho ekatmata iva asmita. And in elaborating on the definition, we understand that Druk Shakti has reference to Purusha Tattva and Darshana Shakti has reference to Buddhi Tattva, or Purusha and Buddhi are referred to. And Purusha Buddhi Ekatmata, oneness, is said to be Asmita. So the question that obviously would come up is that why this sutra is not wording that way, that it is Purusha Buddhi Ekatmata, and why Druk Darshan Shaktyoho Ekatmata, which seems to be a roundabout way of defining Purusha Buddhi Ekatmata. And therefore we are trying to take up now why Patanjali has not opted for simpler words such as Purusha Buddhi Ekatmata. There is defect in using those words, although the sutra is meaning that. Sutra means that Purusha Buddhi Ekatmata is Asmita. However, in definition, such usage cannot be there while it is definition. Why is it? Although it means Purusha Buddhi, why not mention Purusha Buddhi? Is a straightforward, candid question. It's quite naive from point of view of philosophy. The Purusha Buddhi Ekatmata, although it is mentioned, there is a defect in mentioning that in the same words. What is that defect? The defect is as follows. The Purusha Tattvam. The Purusha is intrinsically, inherently, metaphysically, Nitya Shuddha Mukta. Atma, the Purusha, is Nitya Shuddha Mukta. Nitya means eternal, Shuddha means immaculately pure, and Mukta means unbound. So the student of philosophy should not lose advertence on this reality, that Purusha Tattva is Nitya Shuddha Mukta. And then you will understand that here the mention of Purusha would not have been proper. And that's why he has used the word Druk Shakti. So Druk Shakti is referred to Purusha, is reference to Purusha, but Purusha cannot be used for simple reason because the science of definition doesn't allow such expression, and it is very apt and proper. So the point is, the Darshanarthi, student of philosophy, should be aware of this, and one should not lose the advertence on this reality. Now such Purusha cannot be getting Ekatmata with Buddhi, because when he is Shuddha, in a pure state. In pure state, there should be no room for imposition. And therefore, the Purusha principle cannot get that kind of imposition over Buddhi Tattvam, which is inert, which is Prakriti, which is non-spiritual principle. It is a material principle. So never ever there will be ekatmata between two such principles which are absolutely distinctly different, like oil and water. Oil and water will never gel together, will never get mixed up. So this is what the student of philosophy should be bearing in mind. So such Purusha cannot get ekatmata with Buddhi, because who is going to get this kind of imposition or illusion? Insentient principles do not get illusions. It is sentient principles which get illusions. If there is imposition, this imposition is from a sentient principle and not insentient principle. Living principle can only impose something on something, not non-living principles, not non-living things will impose something on something. So this act of imposing or act of imposition or any illusion or any misconception will only occur in living principle and not non-living principle. So this illusion or imposition will not occur from Buddhi. The Buddhi is not going to have it, because the Buddhi is Jada Tattva. The Buddhi is insentient principle. So if at all there is imposition or any illusion or misconception or mistaking, misunderstanding, it would be insentient principle, and then therefore it would be in the Purusha that such things would happen. And this cannot happen simply because metaphysically it is Nitya Shuddha Mukta. So therefore the word Purusha could not be placed in the sutra, because Purusha Tattva is Chinmatra. It doesn't construe knowledge or it doesn't construct knowledge. It is substrate of knowledge. Constructing knowledge is something that is done by insentient principle which seems to be sentient, such as Buddhi, which we have seen in Vritti Sarupyam Itaratra Sutra, that because of proximity the seemingly unconscious seems to be conscious. And we use the example of fireball. The iron ball, which is black and opaque, in fire seems to be fireball. It becomes fireball. It becomes red and translucent. So the Chitta or the Buddhi Tattva, Bodhisattva, which is in proximity with the Purusha, becomes seemingly conscious. And therefore the imposition would be from seemingly conscious principle and not really truly conscious principle. So you should understand the defect in using the word Purusha in place of the Druk Shakti. And therefore the Purusha has not been referred to in words, although the meaning is that the Purusha Buddhi Ekatmata is Asmita. However, that cannot be part of definition. Those words cannot be part of definition. The point is that Purusha Tattva is Chinmatra, that means principle to be getting knowledge. However, it doesn't structure the knowledge. Or it doesn't decide on knowledge that this is this and this is that. Jnana Nishchayam. That's called Jnana Nishchayam. So, um, in the usage, in place of Druk Shakti, the Purusha, then it would mean that Purusha Tattva is getting this imposition. Now, avidya will not be infesting Purusha Tattva, because Purusha Tattva is Shuddha, Buddha, Mukta, and that too Nitya Shuddha Buddha Mukta. Now, it is a Buddha principle, and therefore imposition cannot be coming to that principle. The Purusha Tattva is Kutastha. The Kutastha means residing in a Kuta, residing in some material matters. And therefore, very aptly, Patanjali has used the word Druk Shakti, the power of seer rather than seer. Because the power of seer will not get illusion or will not have imposition. However, the mention of seer itself would not be proper here. So, now being the Druk Shakti, the Purusha, is subjected to the play of Maya, and therefore the Sukshma Shariram, Linga Shariram, all these things take place there. But here Purusha Tattva is bereft of all this metaphysically, and therefore the roundabout way of this definition is not really roundabout way. That is the way to be defining it. Then suppose the word Buddhi is in place here. We considered how Purusha cannot be used. The word Purusha cannot be used, but therefore Druk Shakti is used. Similarly, about Darshana Shakti. Why is it that Buddhi cannot be used here? Although the reference is to Buddhi here, the word Buddhi cannot be used. So, Darshana Shakti cannot be replaced by Buddhi. Because there is again some fault and defect in using the word Buddhi. The Buddhi is a principle called Mahat Tattvam in metaphysics. And when it gets into the human psyche, Antakaranam, it becomes Darshana Shakti. It is only when Buddhi gets into Antakaranam, therefore it gets proximity with the Atma, and therefore it becomes seemingly conscious, and therefore it gets illusion. Buddhi Tattva as such is a cosmic principle, and then there is no animation in it. It is not animate principle. But only when that falls into human psyche, the container that can be called as human psyche, when it falls into it, it can become seemingly conscious. And therefore, using the Buddhi word here, although seems to be convenient and simple, cannot be used. Because Buddhi has reference to that cosmic principle called Mahat. And that is Prakriti, that is Prakritic principle, that is inert principle, that is Jada Tattva. But only when that falls into, gets delimited into human Antakaranam, then it can get seeming sentiency. And therefore the word Darshana Shakti has been used. So that's how we can conclude that Sutra has very precise wordings. Because otherwise Purusha and Buddhi are paraspara vilakshana, paraspara bhinna, paraspara viruddha. That means mutually distinct, mutually characteristically different. So therefore the word Purusha and Buddhi cannot be used, and therefore it is proper to use the Shakti for Druk and the Shakti for Darshana. And that itself is the cause of Asmita. It is not Purusha Buddhi Ekatmata that is causing Asmita. Druk Darshan Shakti Ekatmata is causing Asmita. This is what we have to understand. And that's how we arrive at the solution to the problem that was posed in the beginning. So Buddhi is called Darshana Shakti. Vartikarya Vijnana Bhikshu clearly mentions it for us to construe what is Darshana Shakti. So therefore he says Buddhi is Darshana Shakti, and the word Shakti has been used because we have the phase of creation and deluge, it's a cyclic phase. So in Pralayam, when there is deluge, there is no darshanam. There are not even bhogas. You don't have any experience when it is pralaya, pralayavastha. It is only in sargavastha, in creation phase, we have experiences. But when it is deluge or pralayam, there is no bhogam. Bhoga samarthya is not there in Buddhi. Buddhi cannot have that potential to be experiencing. There is no darshana samarthyam. It neither has darshana samarthyam. It is neither seen category, because there is nothing to be seen in deluge, in pralayam. So yet it maintains the potency, and therefore when there is onset of sarga, onset of creation in cycle, cosmic cycle, it is able to work for bhoga and for darshanam. So that's why the word Shakti. Shakti means potency. So it is potency to be seer and potency to be seen. Now in Pralaya there is neither seer nor seen. In Pralaya there is neither seer nor seen, because everything is reduced to nominal condition. But however, they maintain their power so that in following phase of creation, they can assume those potencies and powers. And therefore the word Shakti has been used, which is for potency, power. And Vijnana Bhikshu clarifies this point and tells us as to how the word Shakti is very, very, very apt. Anyway, if you look into Vijnana Bhikshu, he says his interpretation is Druk Darshan Shakti. And therefore he comments on Darshana Shakti. He doesn't take it as Druk Shakti, Darshan Shakti, Ekatmata. That is not how the sutra is. The sutra is not Druk Shakti, Darshana Shakti, Ekatmata Ivasmita, but Druk Darshan Shakti Oho, Ekatmata Ivasmita. And therefore he says Darshana Shakti, the word Shakti is used for Darshanam, and therefore he only ends up describing why the Shakti is used for Darshanam. So Shakti means Yogyatvam. That is the potentiality. The potentiality means there is a power to really actualize at some stage or at some point in time. So only in creative phase there is bhoktru yogyata and bhogya yogyata. While in pralaya, or what is called as deluge, which is dissolution, in a complete cosmic dissolution, there is neither bhogya yogyata nor bhoktru yogyata. There is nothing to be experiencing and there is no experiencer therefore. If there is nothing to experience, then there is no experiencer. So bhoktru yogyata and bhogya yogyata is only in creative phase and not in dissolution phase called pralayam. Tattva Vaishali of Vachaspati Mishra makes this clear. Drigdarshan yoho iti vaktavye tayoho bhoktru-bhogyayoho yogyata lakshanam sambandham darshetum shakti grahanam. So that is why the word Shakti has been used according to interpretation of Vachaspati Mishra. So anyway, that is how we conclude with the point that Drigdarshan Shaktyoho Ekatmata Iva Smita is a perfect wording to be defining this Asmita. And then Vyasa therefore opens it out in his comment. Purusha is Druk Shakti. It is something that will be seeing. And Buddhi is Darshana Shakti, which is going to show. And when the two are seeming to be identical, then that is the Asmita Klesha, is what is clarification given by Vyasa. So in Avidya we saw that there is indiscrimination of the nature of Atma, Anatma. If you recall the sutra, Anitya Shuchi Dukha Anatmasu Nitya Shuchi Sukha Atmakhyati Avidya. So there are four kinds of indiscriminations mentioned in Avidya Sutra. Nitya Nitya Aviveka, Shuchi Ashuchi Viveka, Sukha Dukha Aviveka, and Atma Anatma Viveka. So Vijnana Bhikshu makes a clarification here that in Avidya there is Atma Anatma Aviveka, while in Asmita it is Purusha Buddhi Avivekam. So it is a kind of indiscrimination, subclass, subtype, secondary type of indiscrimination. Secondary to what? Secondary to Atma, Anatma. So it is more particularized to a phase which becomes Purusha Buddhi Avivekam. The indistinction between Purusha Buddhi is Asmita. So the Avidya filters down in Asmita in the form of this. If in Avidya it is Atma, Anatma, Avivekam, it is filtered down to become Purusha Buddhi Avivekam. So this is the clarification that you get in Vijnana Bhikshu. And that is therefore the Avidya. So although Asmita is also Avidya, as we have seen in the prologue to Klesha topic, that it is all Avidya, 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 Avidya. So we have understood the indistinction in the Pancha Parva Kleshas, all being Avidya, all being forms of Avidya, all being escalations of Avidya. So we can see that it is indistinction between Avidya and Asmita by both being Avidya. But now the distinction becomes clear here in Asmita, that here it is Purusha Buddhi Ekatmata, And avidya, it is atma, anatma, mix up. Anatma is imposed on atma, according in avidya, and here buddhi is imposed on purusha. So therefore, that distinction between avidya parva and asmita parva can be seen. So there is that difference in non-difference, what is called as bheda bhedam. In avidya, there is no this imposition, particularized imposition of the nature of buddhi and purusha. It is general imposition on non-atma, on atma. And therefore this asmita opens out the entire spectrum of our business activity. It is avidya which triggers the entire business activity of life. Avidya doesn't trigger that. But asmita, avidya coming in the form of asmita, triggers the business activity of life because we become something. And therefore we say, I am man, I am woman, I am father, I am son, I am mother, I am daughter. So all these distinctions come, and therefore relationships are established. And because relationships are established, our business activity gets the momentum. So it should be understood that avidya gives rise to our activity. It is not avidya which is giving rise to activity, it is asmita giving rise to activity. So avidya in the form of asmita gives rise to activity. So avidya, asmita do not have swarupa bhedam according to philosophy, but lakshana bhedam. So student of philosophy will be interested here in specifically understanding that between avidya and asmita there is no swarupa bhedam. Substantial difference is not there. The substance in both the places is one and the same. But there is lakshana bhedam. There are attributary changes. Avidya doesn't trigger activity of business of life, but asmita triggers the activity of business in life. Because you get your mindness, you get your I, you get your me. So because your I and me fade in, our activities get unfolded. There is an interesting kind of metaphor used here that can be used in, and it is used in yoga literature. See, when the moon is reflecting in a lake, when the moon is reflecting in a steady lake, it almost appears like moon. It is another moon in the water while there is moon up in the sky. So one moon is up in the sky and the other moon is down in lake. Because it is ditto emulation of the moon in the sky. Because the lake is still, lake is clean and lake is still, and it is reflecting the moon as it is. So, thinking that the moon in the water is moon itself is avidya. The moon in water, reflection of the moon in the water, that itself is moon, is a kind of avidya. But if the lake water is slightly disturbed and there are ripples, then the moon seems to be getting distorted, or the moon starts getting some movements in the water. The moon seems to be losing shape and little disfigurations occurring in the moon which is in the lake. It is because the surface water is disturbed. And therefore, deeming that the moon itself is going out of shape is the kind of asmita. Like the moon is not perfect round, but now it is contorted circle because the lake water is having ripples. So if you think the moon itself is like this, then that is how the asmita is. So the illusion gets expanded. Thinking that the moon in the water itself is moon is 1 degree, 1 grade of illusion. But when the water is shaking or water is disturbed, thinking that the moon itself is like that, distorted, disfigured, it is greater illusion. So therefore asmita is greater illusion than avidya. So that's why avidya raised to 2 is asmita, if you recall that mathematical derivation which we considered. So now asmita is a condition where we think the Purusha is man or woman, the Purusha is father or son, or Purusha is mother or son, Purusha is master or son, looking at the reflection in the psyche. So just as moon reflects in waters, the Purusha reflects in chitta, and therefore it appears to be whatever is the condition of the chitta. Disturbed chitta, therefore Purusha disturbed. If the chitta is having ruffles and rufflings on it, the Purusha seems to be ruffled. That's how it happens in asmita. And therefore, the kartrutva, bhoktrutva, gnyatrutva come down to this imposed asmita. So, the Purusha which is in the phase of asmita, then you get all this kartrutvam, bhoktrutvam, gnyatrutvam. I recall a Sankhya Karika to this effect. The Sankhya Karika 20th. Tasmat Sayogat Achetanam Chetanavat Ivalingam Gunakartutvena Tathak Karteva Bhavati Udasinaha. So, the buddhi which is jada now seems to be sentient. And that is the basis of asmita. That is the basis of asmita klesha, where you get your aham. Now if you have your I, that I is man or woman, young or old, strong or weak, stupid or intelligent, rich or poor, healthy or unhealthy. Your I is always like that. I cannot be free from such conditions. I will be always with such delimitations, which are the polarities which I just now listed. So, otherwise, by essential nature, Purusha Tattva is Udasina, as the Sankhya Karika mentions. But Gunakartutvena Tatha. But when the gunas have influence over, and when there is Sanyogam, Sanyogat Achetanam Chetanavat. So the non-living becomes seemingly living. Insentient becomes seemingly sentient. And this we have seen during the sutra Vritti Sarupyam Itaratra in the Samadhi Padam. So that's how that asmita gives a condition and stature to the subjective entity aham. So aham starts assuming caste, class, creed, gender, status, stage, age, etc., etc. Essentially, it doesn't have all that, but now it seems to be having that, so much so that it is not a seeming condition, but it seems to be a true condition for us. Because we truly have caste, class, creed, gender, status, age, etc., etc. It is not imposition. So, that's how this phenomenon is described by Patanjali in the Vritti Sarupyam Itaratra Sutra, and Sankhya Karika in the 20th verse of it describes it. So, this is the Ekatmata, Abheda Jnanam, imposition. Now, when actually there is abhedam between avidya and asmita, the ekatmata is also being admitted here. So, that is the metapsychological illusion. Asmita is a metapsychological illusion. Imposing silver on nacre or snake on rope is psychological illusion. So this is in very tendency that we have it. So therefore, that illusion which is psychological will come and go and again reappear. It can come back again. Once having got disillusioned, it doesn't mean that you will never get illusion once again. So disillusionment would be there, and re-illusionment too will be there. But with regards to this, that is not there. The disillusionment doesn't come, and there is again re-illusionment doesn't appear, but because it is in our vasana. So anyway, the bhoktru bhogya shaktiyoho atyanta vibhaktayoho atyanta asankaranayoho avibhaga prapta iva satyam bhoga kalpate is what Vyasa tells us. How? Because of this asmita, all these things are getting stuck to us. Bhoktrutvam, Gnyatrutvam, Kartrutvam, they get attached to us. We never get the feeling, or we can never have the feeling that I am not the doer, I am not the endurer, and I am not the knower. It is always that I am the knower, I am the endurer, I am the doer. So that Bhoktru Shakti, it is because of the Bhoktru Shakti, Gnatru Shakti, and Kartru Shakti. So Vyasa therefore says, Bhoktru Bhogya Shaktiyoho, Atyanta Vibhaktayoho, all the totally, absolutely distinct. Nowhere that they can be becoming one. Atyanta Vibhaktayoho, Atyanta Asankirnayoho. Atyanta Asankirna, they cannot get mixed up. They cannot really get mixed up. But yet there is avibhagam, yet there is that indistinction, and that is called the bhoga, which is the cause of bandha. So Vyasa explains how because of asmita we are getting Gnatrutvam, Kartrutvam, Bhoktrutvam, therefore we have to endure all that we are enduring. Otherwise the Purusha Tattva as such doesn't endure anything. All this endurance is to this seemingly conscious principle and not essentially conscious principle. This is to be understood by student of Sankhya and student of Yoga. So, aparinami Purusha seems to be parinami. That's why we in subjective entities sometimes happy, delighted, sometimes sorrowed and sad. Now actually metaphysical Purusha doesn't have all these states and stages, but it all occurs to the seeming phenomenon of Purushatvam in Buddhi, which is like iron ball becoming fireball by being in fire. So the whole karma aspect gets stuck to us because of this asmita. So that's how this asmita is to be understood. Now, an interesting observation here can be considered, with which we will be ending the session today. See, when we get up in the morning, naturally, when our sleep is over and very naturally a wakeful state comes up, it is a twilight state to start with. We are there, but we don't have our I. We don't have sense of I, although we are there. So the I is there. Sense of I is not there for quite some time. Therefore, the initial stage of our awakening is quite a mysterious state, completely balanced state. We do not have any psychic deformities. Our mind is in a placid state, but sooner a state comes that we start craving for our morning cup of tea or coffee. Now, if that doesn't come in time, then we get exasperated or dejected. And if we get it on time, then we are happy and delighted. So it is that moment, the first moment of awakening. There is no sukha dukkha waves. There are no waves and ripples of sukha dukkha. There's a placid state. We don't have raga lobha. We don't have attachment aversion. So we are all almost saintly in the first moment of our awakening. We don't have likes and dislikes, loves and loathes, aversions and attachments, likes and dislikes. We don't have a state that can be called as happy or sad or delighted or sorrowed. So we don't have any state for a while, very short while, on awakening. So the difference between the sun at rise moments and sun later, there is a big difference. The sunrise on the horizon is pleasing sight, colorful sight, pinkish, yellowish, etc., etc. How is the sun? Sun is yellow at the sunrise. But when the sun comes up, then it becomes silver-like. The sun is golden at the sunrise, and it is silver-like after a while. It is, after all, the sun. The sun doesn't have such states. It is not that sun is yellow at some point in time and then not so bright at some point in time, very pleasing at some point in time, and then blazing forth, which is uncomfortable for eyes later. It is not that the sun changes. Sun is the same. But when the sun is on the horizon, we have such an effect of the sun. When the sunrise becomes a pleasing sight to our eyes as well. But once the sun comes up, it is not a pleasing sight for the eyes. We could close our eyes when we look at the sky up, and if the sun is there, we close our eyes. So this asmita in the morning time on awakening is something that tells us about our real psyche. No attachment, no aversion, no like, no dislike, no love, no loath. Nobody is nobody. Nobody is nobody to us. We are not attached to anything. Nothing gets attached to us. We have such a neutral state for a very, very, very short while on awakening. But soon what happens? All gravities storm us. And then we also have gravities We also have gravities, and we are under influence of gravities. We also radiate gravities of love and loath and like and dislike and attachment and aversion, etc., etc. So we also radiate gravities in a short while after our awakening, and we are also victim of all gravities in a short while. So that asmita is close to being pure self. We are all very pure self for just a moment on awakening, very natural awakening, natural kind of awakening. When it's a natural wake up, for a while we are really like yogis. No sooner we become bhogis. So that asmita can give us a kind of description of Jivana Mukta. And so also the last moment of the day when we are about to go to sleep, there is a twilight state that the blanket of sleep is not totally covering us. The sleep slowly comes. So there comes a twilight state again. So one of the mystic poets has referred to this, the point of awakening and point of going to dormancy. These are marvelous points in human daily life. Anyway, when the asmita blazes forth, then we are all victim of conditions such as I am happy, I am sad, I am delighted, I am sorrowed. So the aham becomes ashraya, the support of sukha dukkha. Aham, the pronoun I, becomes support of sukha dukkha. That is what asmita does. And then whole drama of our life unfolds, which is the turmoil of attachment, aversions, likes and dislikes and loves and loaths. And that is why, as I said, avidya is the one which triggers our I-ness. So when the I-ness comes to us, then we start identifying what we like and what we don't like, our attachment and aversions. Therefore, asmita is followed by raga. The moment we get up in the morning, we don't want to see the face of our foe, but we want our beloved cup of tea or coffee. That's our like, to be having a cup of tea or coffee in the morning. So we are soon drawn towards taking our loved one, which is a cup of coffee or cup of tea. And therefore what follows is in search of delight, in search of sukham. The first pravrutti is sukha pravrutti. We don't, on awakening, we don't go for what is a matter of aversion for us. We go in search of, and that's why we have a call for tea and coffee. We register our call for tea or coffee when we get up in the morning. And therefore asmita is followed by sukham and sukhanushayi raga. See the logic in Patanjali Sutra and in dealing with the matter of kleshas. And therefore, with that delineation on asmita, now we are going to the next of the phase, which is called raga. But before going to that, let me make a final statement. Asmita is a klesha, as we see here, but asmita is also support of samadhi. So in Patanjali's treatise, we must bear in mind, asmita comes as support of samadhi as well. And asmita also comes as klesha. So heya paksha and upadeya paksha. Because asmita samadhi is upadeyam and asmita klesha is heyam. So this mystery of asmita is also to be understood here. Because we have considered asmita anugata samprajnata samadhi. There asmita is not klesha. And just now with the example that we saw finally, that our aham in the morning on awakening is pure or purer than the aham which is later, whereby we start getting all kinds of hashtags, that this is an angry person, this is a sensual person, this is a mad person, this is a stupid person, or we get tags such as wise person, etc. But that first moment on awakening, we are free from such tags, hashtags. And that is support of samadhi. That pure state of I-ness, without any contortion, distortion, indentation, then that becomes support of samadhi. So asmita is also support of samadhi. Asmita is also source of klesha, source of affliction. So this mysterious aspect should be taken note of when we are culminating the phase or the discussion or session on asmita. So we'll next move to raga, which is sukhanushayi raga. But that is in the next session. Namaskar all of you.